So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Thank you for joining us. This is the session on a high impact practice of collaborative learning. I'm going to basically start and kind of just give a really brief background, and then we've got some wonderful colleagues that have joined us that are going to give us some examples. And if we have time, we can make it a discussion. If not, we can continue to discuss things later as well. So in general, collaborative learning is really this big umbrella term that covers all kinds of different educational approaches, and really is the idea that we have joint effort by faculty and students to learn together. And we are trying to promote interaction among students, and of course between students and faculty. And so there are a variety of different collaborative learning techniques that one can use in the classroom. There are a few assumptions about learning in general, and these come from these two texts down here. The first is that learning is inherently active and constructive. You have to actively engage in the process, and you have to construct your own understanding for things to really stick. Learning in and of itself depends on the context and your ability to put things into context. Learners are diverse. I talked a little bit about that in the last talk, but certainly there are different ways that students learn. There are also, of course, different backgrounds, different impediments to learning, different things that really help students thrive. So we have to really understand that. And then the last piece is that learning is inherently social. It's one of those things that if we can interact and talk to people, things tend to stick better. And so this is the type of learning that helps us and helps our students to do that. As I mentioned, there are a lot of options for collaborative learning. We are not going to talk about all of these, but if you want more information on any of them, you can look at these publications or certainly reach out to us at the CTL, and we are happy to talk more about them. Think, pair, share. Basically, you're having your students turn to a partner, answering a question, having a quick, brief discussion, and then coming back and as a whole class having a share out and discussion. Small group discussion, just exactly what it sounds like. Jigsaw strategy is one where we have students that get assigned maybe different sections of a paper or different views on a particular topic, and they learn their particular view really well. They then meet with other students that were also on that particular group, and then they break out and they meet with students that were in the different groups, and they now have to be able to explain their particular information and have a discussion with the other groups about all of the material together. Problem-based learning, where students are addressed either maybe with a case study or even just discussion questions from a text, things that they have to do some application of the material they're learning. Writing groups, what it sounds like, so be peer review, those kinds of things. Peer teaching, this is an opportunity for upperclassmen or students that have taken the class before to come back and help students to better understand the material, and also helps for that student to solidify their own learning many times. And then finally, one that I think is probably the most common thought of when you think of collaborative learning, and that's some type of group project or research project, something that sounds really big and overwhelming. And the reality is that any of these can be done within the context of just a few class periods. It doesn't always have to be a big giant project. There are, of course, challenges. The first one, of course, is that most of us went through a learning system where lecturing was the norm. And so the thought that that's not necessarily the way to go has taken us a while, I think, to get through and to really get comfortable with moving away from standing and talking for an hour. Getting more into this idea that if you can present some information, give the students other ways of getting the rest of the information by reading or doing assignments, and then working collaboratively really to help solidify and apply that content. So content in and of itself does not all have to be delivered in a lecture format. And I think that's a big thing, is that students can learn content in other ways. And once we kind of take a deep breath and accept that, I think it's easier for us to move on and to think about doing collaborative learning. And again, in class versus out of class work. Yep, we're in class, and for a long time it was assumed that, you know, the professor was going to stand up and spew out the information in class, and then out of class you just maybe would review. That's not the case. For students to truly learn, they are going to have to put time in out of class, and if you can structure things in a way that they are getting material, reading material or other short assignments and different things so they can apply the work outside of class, as well as even just get introduced to the content. Those are some opportunities for us to really change how we are bringing students into a learning environment. And really the last piece, helping the students learn to learn, right? That's our goal. We want them to be lifelong learners. And if they don't understand how to go about acquiring information and analyzing it for its validity and its application to their lives, then we really are not doing what we need to be doing. So there are a lot of opportunities with this. So having given you like super brief in the background information, I want to move on and have us all talk about some of the different things that we do. So first is
Denise, there's a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to address it here. It says, it's not just about our expectations. In my experience, students often have fairly rigid expectations about what kinds of experiences will occur in certain kinds of classes.
Yes, yes, they do. And I've been working on adding in team-based learning, which Erin's going to talk some more about over probably the past, I don't know, 8 to 10 years or something like that. And I will say that initially students were just like, no, you are supposed to be standing up there lecturing. That is what you are here to do. That is what I am paying you for. And it is a challenge, but I started to do more of those reflective kinds of things. When you ask the students to reflect on what it was that helped them learn, what it was they were not understanding, it seemed to get them really thinking about how it was that they were actually learning the material. It wasn't so much because you were telling them, it was because they were actually taking the information either that you told them or they read, and they were processing it with their peers, or they were processing it on an assignment. So it's a process, but you have to take charge of that process, and you have to accept the fact that your evaluations could suck for a couple of semesters, and that's okay, right? It's amazing for me to look at the changes in our students within the biology department, because so many of us have instituted different forms of collaborative learning. They were really against it at first, and now it's pretty much, they started in freshman class and they are very accepting. But yes, it can be a rough go, and that's okay. So one of the classes that I teach is an upper division. So this particular class, we do a lot of work outside of class for content. So we record our lectures. So it's a team talk course. This is why I say we. We record our lectures. We have short sort of discussions that can happen outside of class. And then when the students come in class, we're doing actual activities, lab activities, things that are going to help them to succeed when we take our trip to Belize and we do our work in the field. And during that process, so during that time of when they're building on content and their different skills, they are developing a group research project. We put them into groups. We have students obviously from both ecology or biology and geology, so we make sure that we mix those students up, and then they have to develop a project. We go down to Belize, they carry that research project out, they collect the data, they help each other in data collection, they analyze the data, and they do a presentation while we're in Belize. It's a very quick, fast, intense class from that perspective of the project, because that sort of takes them a while to develop it, but to actually carry it out, do the analysis, make the presentation is like 10 days. So it's really fast and intense, but it's been something that really helps to give the students a feeling of ownership when we go down to Belize. They own the projects, and they are really amazed at the kinds of things that they learn even in that short period of time. And then I also put in there, we do still do exams. We do individual kinds of assessments as a way to also ensure that students are not just relying on group members and sort of skating through. So there are individual assignments as well. All right, so I wanted Lynn, if you would, kind of tell us a little bit about what you do. So Lynn Smith is in nursing.
Yep. So I am an associate professor in the, wait a minute, this changed last year, the School of Nursing in the College of Health and Human Services. There we go. And basically I teach nursing. And so the reason that I am so invested in this collaborative teaching and stuff is that all of our accrediting bodies and anybody else that looks at us, the Board of Nursing, the the nursing associations, two of our major program outcomes for the students are communication and collaboration and teamwork. And so those are things that really cannot be aligned with PowerPoint and lecture and exams. As Denise said, these things have to be lived and practiced. And so one of the things that I do, and I only teach upperclassmen, so, well, I say that, and then this fall I have a underclass, whatever. But I teach upperclassmen, so I'm going to say make the assumption that they have been brought up, if you will, to the idea of working together. So one of the things I do in my classes is I have group presentations. Now, sometimes these are like projects or research projects. Sometimes they are problem-based issues. And what I do is I use the discussion board in regard to logistics. And I set up anywhere from 4 to 6 discussion groups with the title of whatever it is they're supposed to be looking at, a few tips and resources, and then the students themselves sign up into the groups. I didn't always do this when we were face-to-face, but now that we are online, our students are like all over the place for some of our programs. And so I really can't say for each of them what group is going to work out better with their life and their time. Now, I use the discussion board. You can use other things, obviously Moodle classrooms, Google classrooms. And then what I do for this assignment is I kind of scaffold it. So the first thing is about 3 weeks in, they need to be able to provide an outline of what they're going to address, okay? And then I discuss that with them. And then in another couple of weeks, they have to have a list of resources. So that can either be just a list or it can be an annotated bib, depending on how hard I want them to work. And then they turn in, a couple of weeks later, they turn in a draft of their presentation. And then at the end, I will have put up a new discussion board for all of the presentations to be uploaded into the new discussion board. Everyone in the class has to go through each presentation, and I do have a peer review form that they must complete, and I use some of that in order to grade the presentation. So there are dates, of course, and for which these are different pieces of them are required and due. But I just think that them working, now I will be honest and agree with my colleague that just said sometimes it's the students. Their complaint is, she made us teach ourselves. Which I take as a positive. They meant it as a negative, but we learn, I think we learn better when we are working on something in order to share it and teach it to other people. So just again, some of the, I know I'm probably over my 5 minutes, but some of the topics, the class that I use this in most is my professional, legal, and ethical issues in nursing. So as you can see, you know, I would have just a whole ton of stuff that could be made into discussion. So some of the things I use are violence in the workplace, and like what is the impact of spirituality and culture on the quality of healthcare. And so they basically do that. Now, some of my colleagues use collaborative exams. So once the student takes the exam individually, then she breaks them up into groups and they take it again. And if their group scores an A, they get like 3 points on their individual grade or something like that. There's a scale. But that is, again, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, I think, because the test would have been sort of summative. The collaborative testing is formative. But again, in terms of collaboration and let's put our heads together, which is just absolutely essential in healthcare, I think it works pretty well.
Great.
There was a question, how do you get students who are non-majors in gen ed courses to participate with proper effort? I cannot answer that question because I do not teach gen ed courses.
Well, perhaps.
Well, I take that back. Doug Hume has allowed me kindly and generously to teach one of the gen ed courses in the religion department, but
well, maybe one of our other speakers may be able to.
Hopefully one of those will
address that. All right.
So that's my explanation of how I use this, Denise.
Great. Thank you, Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Denise Knisely, who's going to tell us about Tuvalagi. And you're muted right now, Denise. Oh, it's not working. Your audio is not working. So what I'm going to do, I think maybe if you get out and get back in, double check your computer audio, we'll come back. I'm going to
I'm on now?
Yeah, you're on now.
Okay, it had the wrong, it was trying to go to the wrong microphone.
There you go.
So I can answer that question about getting students to buy in. What I did is I turned it into a game. So for people of a certain age may remember the show McHale's Navy. They were in the South Pacific. Tuvalagi is the name of one of those fake islands that they made up in the South Pacific. And I always thought it was a kind of a cool name. So what I do in my Anthropology 201 class, which is a world cultures class, is I have created a semester-long role-playing game. And Tuvalagi is kind of a square island because I had to set it up to mimic our room. So what happens is at the beginning of the semester, students are given identities randomly. So they can be anyone on this island in these villages, from the matriarch of the clan down to the 16-year-old kid who steals chickens. And it's all very random. And so some of them end up with identities that have different genders, that are different ages. And they really have, I've been doing this now for 3 years, and I have never really had anybody who had a huge problem with the identity they had. There's some horse trading that goes on sometimes at the beginning if they really have problems with it. But most of them wholeheartedly kind of get into it, because what we do is this class introduces them to non-Western societies. And so I give them identities that are part of a matriarchal community, who are small horticultural people. So it's as far away from northern Kentucky as you can possibly get. And they really enjoy it because as we go through and we talk about different concepts in anthropology, like kinship or spirituality or coming of age ceremonies, then they act it out in their little groups in each of their little villages. They act it out. They create this whole world view. They create rituals. A lot of these, I think most of these are, oh, there's a death ceremony here. So my island natives really get into it. So we have some wedding ceremonies here. We have some death ceremonies here. But they take these ideas that we read about with other societies and that we talk about anthropologically, and they live it. So once a week, once every other week, they become these islanders, and they come up with ways. They figure out how to trade items with each other. They got really angry at me because I wouldn't tell them what things were worth. So that's something they had to work out on their own. And so it's sort of a collaborative storytelling. But in the process, they're bringing in all of these ideas that we talk about in class, and they're applying them. And in the process also, because this is a gen ed class, and because many of them are first-time freshmen, they're also put into these close-knit groups who talk about their beliefs in their personal life, where they talk about what they think is right and wrong and how the world should be, and they become friends. I have some students who I bump into on campus 2 years later that are like, I'm still best friends with grandma from our tribe. And so they also start building those social networks that we know are so important for keeping students persisting from semester to semester. And so it's a lot of fun for me. Every class is very different. Some of them are more warlike than others, and they, want to steal each other's pigs, and do a variety of different things. But when you make learning fun, I found that students really, they get into it. Though I did, someone said that students have expectations of what class should be. I did have one student one time on an evaluation say that I needed to teach more and play less. I think that's the only one in 3 years who really had an issue with playing the game. I have students who come back and still I'll see them on Facebook talking about the game from 3 years ago. And they really do seem to enjoy it and get a lot out of it. And I've had some really positive interactions with the students, and some of them that are like, well, I never thought of myself as a leader before. And now they're like, well, I had to be a leader of my group. And so I found out that I can actually do this. So it's just been a really exciting thing for me to do. It's a lot of fun. And I think there was a question. Oh, how to make it work online. I'm doing that this semester. It's difficult. So I'm using Microsoft Teams so that they have a chat that they can keep track of the whole time. But I'm also leaving a lot more to for them to figure out on their own kind of things in the chat. I mean, I'll always be part of it, but we won't, of course, be able to do something like this. But there's been a lot of collaborative videos online of different groups doing things in their own spaces and then pulling it all together as a single video. And so I'm hoping to be able to do something like that. I'll be able to report more back on that later as to how that went. But yeah, a good portion of my summer has been spent trying to figure out how I can get my island online and still have a good time with that.
Well, thank you very much, Denise, for sharing that. Our next volunteer colleague is Erin Strom from biology.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks for inviting me to talk a little bit today. Can you go to the next slide?
You bet.
So I teach what I would call problem-based team learning, and I've done this in kind of a wide variety of biology courses, from intro courses with over 100 students to kind of upper level courses that normally more have like 25. And I started with this kind of collaborative learning in order to increase student interaction with them, with each other, with me, try to improve their critical thinking and problem solving, and get them more engaged. And I traded my lecture time for that, but we've also seen that kind of DFW rates and the give ups, the students that just stopped coming, have really gone down because of using this kind of collaborative learning methodology. Go to the next one. Thanks. So basically, my courses are set up in modules where a module would be a particular topic. And for me, that's frequently a chapter of a book, a textbook, or part of a chapter of a textbook or something like that. And what I do is I assign the students readings from that chapter with a reading guide. So a set of questions that I want them to be able to answer when they're completed the reading. And they do that individually outside of class. Then they come to class and we'll spend whatever time we need answering any questions over the reading. And then they take a quiz. And that quiz is really just to motivate them to do the reading and to show up prepared with that basic level of kind of background knowledge. And they take the quiz individually, and then they take the quiz as a team, both of which count for points for their grade. And they take the quiz as a team to make sure that they aren't leaving the class kind of with misconceptions, thinking that they got 100 on the quiz and really they got a 50 and they don't understand why. So they discuss out all the answers. And again, that helps them all get to the same background level, so that they can then start using that information. And so oftentimes the information that they got in the reading, I will implement into a case study, and they'll spend the rest of that first class period doing a case study together as a group. My groups are normally somewhere between 3 and 5, with 4 being the most common. Again, I've done this live, face-to-face mostly. We went remote in the spring, and they tried to do it through discussion boards, but mostly I've done this face-to-face in classes where they're sitting next to each other. Then for the next class period, they would come to class and I would give what I term a mini lecture. So normally around 20, 25 minutes. And that's me advancing and talking about additional topics on top of that builds on what they read about. And then they get back into their teams and they work on challenge questions, discussion questions. So it's that application piece that Denise was talking about earlier. So the students are trying to take what they read, what they talked about in their case study, what they just heard me talk about in the classroom, and apply it to solving a variety of different types of questions. And we do that for several days on a given topic. And then normally kind of 2 modules go together and they'll take an exam individually. Go ahead, Denise. So in thinking about doing this type of collaborative learning, I think how you design the teams is pretty important. But that being said, I've done it in a variety of different ways, and I don't know that there's one that has stood out to work the best. So I've used an opinion questionnaire, something like, do you like to be the leader, or what role do you take on teams? Do you like to work with people who have similar mindsets to you or different mindsets to you? If it's kind of a not first year course, I'll ask them about what other classes they've taken so that I know kind of what background information from different subjects they're bringing in. So I've done them that way and created diverse teams from those opinion questionnaires. I've also done them based on GPAs. So I'm mixing students with higher GPAs with students who don't have quite as high GPAs in order to kind of spread that. And then I have also done it with making teams where similar GPAs are grouped together. And again, I don't know, I have not assessed to see if there's really a winning way, but anecdotally, I think any of these approaches will work as long as you're monitoring and working with the teams. You go to the next one. Great. Okay, so in order to set this up, there are some challenges here. So there are a lot of materials to generate. There was a question earlier about expectations, and I try to be very clear in what I expect and very clear in outlining everything I'm asking them to do, when it's due, what I will provide, what I'm going to do. But that means there's a fair number of documents. So I'm creating that reading guide. I'm giving them learning objectives. I'm making those challenge questions. I'm working with those case studies to make them applicable. And then, of course, you have to grade. And so since there are a lot of documents that the students are writing and answering, then providing that meaningful feedback does take time. Students do report that they learn more in this type of setting than in a typical course. And certainly there's a lot less lecturing and more student-student and student-professor interactions. And then my last slide, I don't want to read this to you, but I've had questions in the past when I've talked about this type of course structure about kind of what are the main tips. So in general, I do think being explicit is really important and making your expectations clear from the beginning. Forming groups and teams strategically. I've now gotten to the point that I change the teams after every exam so that they get a little bit different experience with different students. I also use peer evaluation to motivate them in those teams to complete their work. And they get feedback after every team as to what they could be working on and what they're doing well to help them build those collaboration skills. Keep your mini lectures kind of short, keep the classroom interesting, doing different things. That's why I do mini lectures, I do challenge questions, I do case studies, a variety of kind of different things for them to be involved in. In making my expectations clear, I try to get everything up to them at least a week in advance so they have time to do the readings and look over things ahead of time. And then certainly get feedback and adjust as needed. And I will stop there so we can have any questions if there are.
Sure. You have one question. It says, Erin, do you have different expectations from the low GPA groups versus the high GPA groups?
I don't, and I have not seen it play out where the low GPA groups do kind of worse across the board. What I did see when I was making groups with diverse GPAs is that often the students with the higher GPAs in the group tend to be the more type A, maybe leaders that want to dominate the conversation and they want to be the one that always writes the answer. And it didn't give students that might just have a lower GPA as much of a chance to participate. And so when I split those groups differently and did more similar GPAs, the groups that might have had a little lower GPA, but everybody in that group had that lower GPA, were then kind of all able to participate and all pushed to step up and fill into that role. And so that's kind of why I switched between those types.
Yeah, I've also found the same thing. Putting the little bit lower GPA students together just really, it changes the dynamics a lot. Another question is, can you clarify the challenge questions? Is this more content oriented or more reflection about the concepts?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of it is content oriented. So the main class I've been teaching recently is a cell biology course. So a lot of molecular things that are happening inside a cell, and they just need to learn some of the pathways. But then I guess not so much reflection, but more application to bigger topics, like with the case studies. These are things the students can't see to appreciate. So we might pick a disease state that is impacted by that pathway going wrong, and then kind of work through how that all applies. What are the steps that we just talked about? And then how does it going wrong lead to that disease state or something like that? So it is a mix of kind of reflecting back to me some of the content in a bigger question, questions like they might see on an exam. So they're practicing answering that type of thing, or more application to kind of broader topics.
Great. Well, thanks to Denise and Lynn and Erin for sharing. That is all of our time. Again, this will all be up, the recording, the PowerPoint, and certainly if you have further questions, you're welcome to reach out to any of us. So thank you all, and please join us at noon for our panel on equity. I think it'll be really interesting. Thanks a bunch.